Hi, I'm Ryan Brassfield, and my presentation today will be on the expensive tissue hypothesis. So to get started, what is the expensive tissue hypothesis? This is a hypothesis for understanding the evolution and enlargement of the human brain. And it is basically saying that there's a negative correlation to gut size and brain size. So as the brain increased in size, the gut was the trade-off and decreased in size. The energy trade-off hypothesis, on the other hand, because of the narrowness of expensive tissue hypothesis, is a broader view of the same idea, where it's looking at really any trade-off that could occur between organs or behavior in order to reallocate that energy towards another tissue. And so this helps to keep a broader scope in understanding the expensive tissue hypothesis as well. To understand these, we'll look at energetics in the body, and this relates to an improved diet. Last, we'll look at a few comparative anatomical studies of some different organisms. So here's just a quick glance at this chart here. It's showing the expensive brain framework and all the different ways that we could pay for a brain enlargement. I want to point out at the decreased maintenance, we see a decreased gut. So that's our extensive tissue hypothesis. The other allocated branches of the allocation refer more towards the energy trade-off hypothesis. As for energetics, some pretty interesting and key facts that will help us understand the price of a large brain are that the brain uses approximately 20 to 30% of energy that is brought in to the body. That moves all the way up to 70% in infants whose brain is developing much more. And an interesting comparison is that the brain, a piece of brain tissue uses 22 times the energy of a similar piece of muscle tissue. The chart below shows all the different organs and their organ mass percent body mass, and on the far right, percent total body BMR. As we see with the first five, the brain, heart, kidney, liver, and GI tract, they account for a very small portion of the body mass, and yet they make up over 50% of the total body BMR. So we can see that a change in GI tract, decreasing that, will allow for the brain to be larger. Here's a quick comparison on the bottom right of the human and chimp brain. Since that's our closest relative, we see a substantial difference and substantial increase in the human brain size compared to the chimp. While looking at primates, this chart on the left was created using some mathematical mechanisms that I don't quite understand, but we see that they created an expected column for different organs of the human versus observed. When comparing them, we see the liver, kidney, and heart are approximately what would be expected, but the gut and brain are different, where the brain of the observed brain in a human is much larger, while the gut is much smaller. Part of a decreased gut size, it correlates with a richer diet. And this is necessary because normally, with a diet of vegetation and more difficult materials, it's difficult to get the adequate energy to support the body. And also, a short-based diet has minerals that are important for the brain, such as iodine and iron, zinc, copper, and selenium. Approximately 2 million years ago, in the fossil record, we can see the introduction of tools by Homo habatus. This allowed for hunting to obtain meats, and which are high in energy, amino acids, and other important nutrients that are necessary for not only the body, but especially for the brain. And real quick, when we think of the brain compared to other organs, for example, the gut is most active during parasympathetic activity and not really active during sympathetic activity, whereas the brain is constantly active, even during sleep. So it's a constant consumer of energy. And this kind of relates to the tools, where we see approximately 2 million years ago when tools were introduced, we see the beginning of increased cranial capacity, shown on the left axis, while age in millions of years is shown on the x-axis. As we move left towards 0, which is today, we see this exponential increase in cranial capacity size. To the right of 2 million years, we see a steady, unchanging cranial capacity size. So with this change of diet, gut size could increase and brain size could increase. 3 comparative anatomical studies that we'll look at are with Lake Tanganyika cichlids, birds, and guppies. First, the birds is pretty straightforward, and we see a negative correlation between pectoral muscle mass and brain mass. As we move right along the x-axis, residuals in pectoral mass increase, and residual in brain mass increase as we go up the y-axis. As we move right, we see a decreased correlation between brain mass and pectoral mass. For the Lake Tanganyika cichlids, this was an example of these cichlids went through adaptive radiation in the past, and they're at different layers in the lake and different lakes and different diets. The ones with longer gut length are in the present of a more vegetative diet, and we see a significant p-value indicating a negative correlation between gut length and brain size. 2 other significant parameters were egg size and carrier duration, which relate more to the energy trade-off hypothesis, but we see that there is a negative correlation between egg size and brain size, and a positive correlation between carrier duration and brain size, which is similar to humans. The guppies experiment was most interesting because they were more controlled, and these guppies were actually bred over generations in a controlled environment. 2 populations were seen to come from this, large brain versus small brain. After the populations came, they studied them, and especially in the males, there was a strong negative correlation between male gut mass and brain size. On the right graph, we see a negative correlation between number of offspring in the first part nutrition and brain size in female guppies. So to bring it all together, the expensive tissue hypothesis and energy trade-off hypothesis really work hand in hand. While the energy trade-off hypothesis is much more broad, it supports this idea that we can have a trade-off. And in humans, it's observed that one of these major trade-offs is between the gut and brain. While other changes may have occurred over evolution, which is for another time, through this evidence shown, it is clear that this hypothesis has much backing. This also makes sense because different taxa are going to experience different trade-offs. And so, looking at birds, their trade-off was the pectoral muscle mass. And this also makes sense because we remember going back to the chart, the increased cranial capacity happened approximately 2 million years ago. And this was more recent than the divergence of birds and humans. So they're going to undergo their appropriate trade-offs and evolutionary changes at different times and under different circumstances. To continue studying this, since a lot of the comparative studies were with the different fish and the birds, it'd be interesting to move towards primates since they're more closely related, and especially look at primates and future generations in the presence of different diets. So with a more energy-rich diet, see if that has any effect on brain size in future generations versus more vegetative diet, which is more common to chimps now. And that's it. Thanks.